Hello everyone and welcome to another video from Aha Moments with the Koi. I am Gwen Heiser. I am owner and operator of Lavender Koi Yoga in Berlin, New Jersey. So I wanted to start a series of videos around the yamas and the niyamas. So today we're going to talk about Ahimsa, which is Sanskrit for nonviolence. So I'm going to be using one of the greatest books written around this topic. And this book is by Deborah Adele. I highly recommend this book. I am not being paid to recommend this book whatsoever. But through my journey of working with the yamas and the niyamas, I have found that this book is just one of the best ones out there, and the way that she breaks them down and teaches and gives stories around using these beautiful tools for life. It's just, I cannot recommend it enough. So again, that is Deborah Adele, The Yamas and the Niyamas. Awesome book. So let's dive in. So the yamas and the niyamas, if you are unfamiliar with these tools, these life tools, the yamas are the first set of 5 ethical guidelines that we use to help us function within the material world. And they are number 1 on the 8 limbs of yoga philosophy, which is the basis for yoga, the practice of yoga. And the niyamas are another set of 5 ethical guidelines that help us navigate and self-realize. So they are observances of the self, which help us navigate through our inner world. So we have our 2 worlds that we exist within. We are these human beings, and we exist within a material world, but we are not of the material world. So then we have ourselves to self-realize as well. So these are, I cannot say this enough, these are phenomenal tools to help relieve suffering within your life. I have worked with them for many years, and they have helped me so much on my life path. So the first one, Ahimsa, like I said, it is Sanskrit for nonviolence. And when I first heard this one, I was like, nonviolence, easy. I am not the type of person that intentionally goes out and harms people. But the more I worked with this yama, it teaches you that there are so many subtle acts of violence that are brought on in our everyday life. And we don't even realize it. So it's not intentional, or sometimes it is intentional. But, once we start breaking this down, we will start to realize, that we are performing these acts of violence, and then we can kind of hone it in, okay? So nonviolence actually sits as the structure and foundation for all the other guidelines. So that's why it is so important, and that's why it's number 1. Right? So when we start to look at the subtleties of violent acts that happen throughout our day, the first one we start to take a look at within ourselves is courage. So finding courage within ourselves. So this goes around the idea of fear, right? So we have two types of fear that we deal with. The first type is fear around us surviving. So this is a legitimate fear that we should all have and we should all be concerned about. Right? The second one is the one that debilitates us in life. So the fear that keeps us from living our life. And when an emotion like fear keeps us from living in our life, we are performing an act of violence towards ourselves, because most of the time we don't need to be afraid of those things. But that does not mean that, it's going to take away from the legitimacy of us really feeling fear around it. So how we work with this concept of fear and the fear of the debilitating fear, keeping us from living our life, is to actually put ourselves in it, right? So when we start to look at creating courage within ourselves, so courage is not the absence of fear, okay? Courage is being able to move through that fear or go into that experience being fearful, but not letting it paralyze us. So that's courage, right? Choosing to go into that fear and being able to take a step towards it, right? That is a step towards courage, right? So how do we develop more courage within ourselves? So I was listening to a talk a couple years ago, and I found this to be, comical, but there's so much truth to it. So it was an interview with the woman who had created Spanx. And if you are a woman, then you probably know what Spanx are. So this woman was being interviewed, and she said one of her biggest fears was being embarrassed in front of a group of people. So she realized that she didn't want to be fearful of that anymore. So she started doing little acts, little actions to put herself into an embarrassing moment, to be able to build up the courage to not have fear around being embarrassed in front of people anymore. So one of the things that she would do was she would trip into an elevator full of people, and then she would have to ride that elevator with that group of people that just witnessed her tripping into the elevator. And in the beginning, it was like almost paralyzing to her. But as she did it more and more, she realized, what was the big deal? Right? What was the big deal that she was a little embarrassed in front of a group of people? And by doing that, it started to dissolve the fear, right? So it was like taking one step forward, and then you realize that one step wasn't so bad. Then that gave you enough courage to take another step forward, right? And then after you take two steps forward, what's the big deal about the third one? Right? Another way that we kind of paralyze ourselves around fear is actually thinking about the act before it happens. So for example, going skydiving, like that is a very scary experience for a lot of human beings. I skydived probably when I was in my 20s. I'm in my 40s now. And I remember it was a group of 10 of us. And the night before we were going to skydive, we were all hanging out at a house, and someone started talking about all the possibilities that could go wrong with us skydiving. And I was like, hold up. Right, let's stop talking about this, because if we start to plant the seeds within our heads, I know for me, I wouldn't have jumped out of the plane. Right, so it was the anticipation and thinking about the act that was causing the fear. but I really wanted to do it. So the not taking that away, not going down the rabbit hole of possibilities that could go wrong, like stopping, the group of people, but also stopping myself, because once someone started talking about it, I started to really think about it. So I just put a stop to it, had a conversation with my group of friends and a conversation with myself and said, Gwen, don't think about it. You really want to do this. And the more you think about it, you're going to psych yourself out. So reel it back and just have a really good time around having that experience. And it was one of the best experiences of my life. It was awesome. So we have this ability to think the worst. And actually, human beings, unfortunately, that's what they always go to first, right? It's actually a protective mechanism within the design of a human being to kind of think of the worst possible situation first before we think of the best outcome. So we have to put in a little bit of work around, not thinking the worst out of something first and going towards the positive first. So knowing our tendencies is going to help us kind of break apart and unpack why we have fear around, anything that we have in life, right? And again, the act of courage is not having the strength right up front, right? It is having enough within you to just go a little bit forward. Remember, there's no time frame for anything. If you want to do something, go at your own pace, right? If you're the type of person that has to just go for it, then go for it. But if you're that type of person that likes to take little steps to build up that courage, then please do. That's why you need to know about yourself. You need to know how you are and what's going to make you comfortable in your life so that you can get rid of that fear that you have that's debilitating you in your life, so that you can free yourself up and release yourself from that violent act that you are performing against yourself unintentionally. Right? So one of the last things around this fear idea is what happens is we get comfortable within that realm of being fearful, right? I know a number of people that will not do the work to get out of that state of fearfulness because they have found comfortable around being fearful. No, I can't do that. I'm afraid to do that. No, I can't do that. I'm afraid to do that. So it keeps them in this safe space for themselves to be afraid. So when that happens, that is an extreme case that we have to really unpack, because we've developed this idea of who we are around being fearful. It becomes our reason. It becomes our why. And if we are using that as an excuse to pour concrete on our feet and not be able to live our life, then we have to start really working with ourselves and taking those little steps forward to release ourselves. And the first step in that realm of fear is realizing it first, realizing what we were doing to ourselves, right? So the next thing that we want to start to focus on around nonviolence is balance, right? Where does balance show up in our life? And balance shows up differently for everyone. When we are imbalanced in our life, that is when we start to perform violent acts against ourselves and to others. So being balanced in your life is so important, and it really comes from Like I said, it shows up differently for people. So we really have to listen to ourselves. We really have to get to know ourselves and see where the imbalances are. Because, something as simple as not getting enough rest the night before, and then you being cranky the next day, and then you're taking it out on everybody that comes into your space, you're performing acts of violence towards those people, and you're just cranky. Right? So that's an imbalance that you have within you that is showing up, right? So that we know that we need to get more rest, so that we take care of ourselves and we move into a space of balance for ourselves. Okay, so like I said, balance. Once we create balance within ourselves, it's harmony. And when we have harmony, we have peace within. So balance is very important. Everything in life functions off of balance. So we really want to pay attention to that in our lives. Like I said, ahimsa is the foundation for all the other yamas and niyamas. So we really want to focus on this balance thing, because that is connected to everything in our life. Okay, so whether we have an overpacked schedule, right, and we just are overworked, right, that's going to be an imbalance in our life. When we become frustrated in life, we act out because we're frustrated. Like, that's not a good feeling to have within us. When we're unhappy or we're just emotionally withdrawn within our life, that is going to produce actions of violence, again, towards ourselves. When we're imbalanced, we already are performing an act of violence towards ourselves. So again, it is within us to bring awareness around this idea, so that we start to put in the pieces or remove things that are causing the imbalance. Remember, this is our one life, right? So this stuff is so important. It is helping us not suffer in our life. So, just think about those times in your life when you were just short with a coworker. Maybe you were just frustrated because, they did something dumb, right? And then it caused you to get frustrated with them, right? Maybe they didn't know, right? And you were just in a space of frustration where you lashed out on them. We do these things. We are human beings, and it's okay that we do them, but we have to kind of own up to it and take responsibility to it. And by taking responsibility is by paying attention to ourselves and taking a moment to breathe before we actually act, right? Think about those times where you snapped at maybe your partner or a loved one within your family. That is an act of violence. It doesn't feel good. Like, no one likes to be snapped at, especially someone that you really, really care about, just because you were feeling a certain way, right? There's a couple examples, just a personal example that I have when I realized, these subtle acts of violence that, in essence, really, I didn't think were a big deal. But, over time, when things get built up, it becomes a really big deal. So you want to act in a way that's always pure of heart, right? That has a pure intention, always coming from a place of compassion within you instead of frustration. It's very hard to do sometimes, but the more you do it, the more it becomes your norm, and the more it becomes your conditioning, and it just becomes the way you are, instead of you having to try to make it work. Right. So again, one of my personal experiences is my youngest son. is a screamer. Screams at the top of his lungs when he's excited. Super big screamer. So I don't like a lot of noise. I'm very sensitive to it. So I remember I was in the kitchen cleaning something up, and he was younger at the time, and he was screaming at the top of his lungs. He was having a really good time doing whatever he was doing. And his screaming was like daggers going into my spine. It was just so uncomfortable, and it was driving me crazy. And in that moment, I was about to scream at him to stop screaming. And I paused and I took a couple breaths, and I said, if I yell at him for screaming, it is just going to crush him, because he is laughing, having a good time, enjoying his moment in his life. And because he was frustrating me, that gave me no right to yell at him. So I took a couple breaths, and I said, you know what? I just need to take a moment. I think I went into the bathroom, which if you are a mother of a bunch of young kids, you probably have done this before as well. Just go into the bathroom, turn the water on in the sink, and just breathe and have a moment to come back to yourself and realize what is really happening. And what was really happening was I didn't want him screaming, right? It was bothering me, but it was bothering me. It wasn't bothering him. It wasn't bothering anybody else in the house. So I had no right to yell at him or, punish him or, say anything to him about it. I think I might have just told him to calm it down just a little bit. But that's it, right? And if I went forth and just screamed at him, right, it would have been very upsetting to him. And as a mother, I would have been very upset that I did that as well. So there would have been an act of violence on him and an act of violence on me. So by taking just that moment to realize and kind of have a conversation with myself, I was able to stop that act of violence. Right? So another example was when we're two in our heads, when we get two on our heads, maybe we have a big project we're working on, or maybe we're just trying to figure something out in our head. The people around us are affected by that as well. So I remember a woman telling a story after we were actually having a conversation around Ahimsa. She started crying, and everyone was like, what's wrong? What's wrong? And she's like, oh my gosh. She's like, I just realized I have this huge project at school that I'm in charge of, that I've been working on. And, it's supposed to happen next week, but for the past couple weeks, she just lived with her and her husband. She had just realized in that moment that she hadn't made eye contact with her husband in over a week. And they live together, sleep together, eat food together. And she just felt awful about it because, she loves him dearly. And she just felt like she was just ignoring him. And of course, he loves her, just giving her her space, but that is an act of subtle violence, against someone that they loved. And it hurt her deeply, because we want to show up for our loved ones. We want to be there for our loved ones, even if it's, just a moment of making eye contact. Eye contact is an energy exchange. It's a beautiful experience, right? I love looking into the eyes of the people that I love, right? There's so many ways that that imbalance can cause us to do little or big acts of violence towards ourselves and to others. So it's kind of knowing our triggers and setting our life up so that we don't have that excuse, right? And granted, we are all human beings and we all have a lot to do in our lives. So, those moments that we do have weakness and lash out against our loved ones, all we can do is own up to it and really apologize and communicate and explain why we did that, right? And I know that it's nice to hear, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to snap at you," right? I was just, in the midst of something, and I really didn't mean to do that, and I feel awful that I did that, right? That makes it, so much better, right? And then the more we pay attention to these things, the more more they come into our radar, right? And once they're in our radar, we're able to, you know, work with them a lot better, with a lot more clarity and focus, right? So our next one that we want to focus on is dealing with the feeling of powerlessness. So when we feel powerless in our lives, it's not a good feeling, right? So we might act out because we are feeling incompetent, not enough. We feel as if something is being taken away from us, or we feel like we don't have any control over a situation. And it's just not a good feeling. But there is a way to work with it. So, one of our biggest challenges around powerlessness is to make sure that we have balance in our life. Because if we move into a place of imbalance, then we definitely feel a little bit of powerlessness. So Ahimsa encourages us to really pay attention to those moments of imbalances where powerlessness shows up in our lives. So powerlessness, it really questions life. It asks us to not just accept that feeling of powerlessness, but really question why we feel powerlessness in our life. And again, that shows up for people differently. So when working with powerlessness, we need to ask ourselves, why? Why do we feel powerlessness? A lot of powerlessness comes from or stems from a lot of our conditioning, our tendencies, our assumptions that we have as a human being. And especially if we are a control freak. Always trying to have control. And when we don't have control, that is a direct slap in the face of powerlessness, right? So one of the ways that we deal with feeling powerless in our life is maybe asking ourselves why we feel powerlessness in the moment. And working with ourselves, we always have to be truthful with ourselves. Remember, we're the only ones, right? No one else can hear your thoughts. No one else can get in there. Only you can. So get in there and start to realize some roots that are causing these imbalances and powerlessness and fear to come up in your life, in aspects of your life. Right. So when we feel powerless, we need to ask ourselves, what is going to help us feel more power and more control in this situation? So just a small example, I had recently just went to the Galapagos Islands, and we are in the midst of the pandemic, COVID. So before we were allowed to get on the airplane, we had to have a negative COVID test, once we got to Ecuador, we had to take a COVID test and we had to have a negative COVID test. And then we were in our hotel rooms, but before we got on the ship, because we lived on a ship for a week that traveled around the Galapagos, and we went to different islands, we had to have another negative COVID test before we even got on the ship. Now, this is a great vacation, a great experience that, I didn't want to miss because of the possibility of having a positive COVID test. So it was me and my son that were going, and we both needed to have those negative COVID tests. And we were leaving the day after Thanksgiving. So because of the holiday and because of everybody getting COVID tested to make sure that they could go visit their families, the turnaround time to get the test results back was prolonged. So all of our tests to be able to go on the trip, we had to be within a certain amount of time, within 72 hours, one had to be within 24 hours. So it was very stressful. Speaking with my father, he said, okay, right, here's the situation, right? We can't control when we're gonna get our test results back, right? We have an idea of when they're gonna get back. So I felt powerlessness, right? I couldn't control any of it. I just had to kind of like do it and hope. But he said, let's eliminate risk. And when you eliminate risk, you feel a little bit more control, right? You can kind of bring some ease around it. And so after he said, what can you do to eliminate risk? I was like, thank you, Dad. I got a COVID test for each of us, my son and I, for all week, right? So at least one of them was gonna come back on time, right? So by, just having that conversation and him saying, okay, but what can you do, right, to eliminate the risk? That put me more in control. That put me more in power, right? And then it brought more ease around the situation, right? So we just need to ask ourselves, we can't do this. We know we have no power over this, but what can we do to bring more power into that situation, right? So that's one way that we bring control into a situation that feels out of control, right? So one of the other ways is really getting to know yourself. What are your tendencies? What is your conditioning? What is your assumption around things that cause you to feel powerless in your life and experiences in your life? It drives you crazy, right? Just thinking about it, right? So for example, right, another example, when we feel out of control, especially around others, right, other people. We can't control other people. We have no idea what other people are going to do. We have no control over it. But if we are involved with another person and say that person says something to you that's very hurtful, right? And you're very distressed by this feeling of hurt, and you feel like you were wronged by that other person. What can we do? What can we do to feel more power in that situation when we have no control over that other person? So what's happening, right? We need to address what's happening within ourselves. So what's happening is we are constantly thinking of that person, right? And what they said to us and how hurtful it was. And by doing that, right, we are giving that person more power than ourselves. Right? So that person who said something to you that hurt you, right? You're over here hurting, but that person could probably have forgotten that they even said that thing to you, right? And they're not even thinking about it at all, right? So you're suffering. They're living their life. Who has the power, right? So what can we do, right? We're very hurt. We're hurt by that person, right? So there's a beautiful Buddhist teacher. Her name's Andrea, and she works with forgiveness and helping people forgive others who have hurt them severely, around heartbreak, for a number of things. And so having compassion for another person, right? Even when, this is very difficult, even when they have wronged you, even when you feel like that person's evil, right? Because there are evil people in this world. What can you do to get your power back, right? So that person, right, maybe they're not even in that realm of like thinking that they need to say sorry to you, right? Did their thing, they're going off living their life, right? You can bring power back to yourself by letting them go, right? Cutting them out of your life, right? Especially if they are a repeat offender, really, disrupting your life and doing hurtful things to you, right? Take your power back, cut them out, right? Cut them out of your life, or just have a distance, right? Put up boundaries and say, I am not going to let that person get to me anymore, right? Another thing that we can do is forgive, right? Forgive and realize that maybe that person is hurting. And when people hurt, they like to hurt others as well, because they want to bring others down to their level, right? So just understanding that it's an easier way to forgive that person, and it is also a way to get your power back. Not that that person pull you down with them or drain you, right? Put your boundaries up, right? Always have boundaries for yourself, right? It's your life. You are the creator of your life. So put those boundaries up and say, I don't deal with people like that, and I'm not going to let them take away my power, my light. Right? So yes, the next thing that we want to move on to around this idea of ahimsa is self-love, right? If we do not love ourselves, if we're not in love with ourselves, we need to get in love with ourselves, right? We need to love our personality, because we have our own personality. No one else has our personality. So get to know your quirks. Make fun of yourself, right? You're supposed to be able to laugh at yourself. And don't dim your light, right? Not everyone is gonna like you, right? And that's just a fact, right? But the people that do like you and the people that do love you, let them in, right? Let them in and allow yourself to show them how much you love them, and that love is going to bounce back to you. It's going to radiate back towards you, right? So showing up for others will help you show up for yourself in your life. And it's a beautiful, beautiful practice. Having self-love, one of the ways that I learned to really love myself, because there was a point in my life where I truly hated myself, was I looked at myself in the mirror, right? And I didn't look at myself in the mirror to look at my face to see if, stuff was in order. I actually didn't even look at the face. I looked directly into my eyes. And that was the first time I truly believe that I saw myself. I saw into my soul. And everyone can do this. All you have to do is look at yourself in the mirror, into your eyes. And probably for a year, I did this every single morning, and I told myself how much I loved myself. And, those days that I just felt crappy, I just felt awful, I was depressed, the moment I looked into my eyes, it gave me this incredible opportunity to forgive myself for anything that I felt like I needed to forgive myself for, because you see past it all. So do yourself a favor. If you need to find some self-love, look at yourself in the mirror, look into your eyes. That's it. Don't look anywhere else. Just look into your eyes. It's a beautiful place to land. Right? And you'll discover yourself there. You'll discover your essence, your soul, and how much it radiates out and how beautiful you are. So how we treat ourselves is in truth how we treat those around us. Right? So if we don't love ourselves, we're not going to be nice to anybody around us. But if that's the way you want to live your life, then go ahead. That's the way you want to live your life. But if you are noticing that you are really acting out and you're not having a lot of emotions around compassion and love for yourself, really start to discover that feeling, because again, this is your life. Do you want to move through your life not loving yourself or not even liking yourself? Right? There are moments, right, where, I love myself deeply, but there are moments where I'm like, oh, I just want to get away from Gwen. Why can't I just get away from Gwen for just a little bit, right? Because she's getting too much to me. Those are moments where, again, you can have that conversation with yourself and be like, oh, I need some self-love, right? And self-love, might be, going, getting a massage, or going and doing something that you love, going for a walk in nature. It's not something like, oh, I need to go buy that handbag that I really wanted, or I need to go buy those shoes that I really wanted. That's going to make me feel better. It'll make you feel better for about maybe a day, or maybe even just 20 minutes. You want long-lasting love for yourself. So we need to start to build that up within ourselves. So the next thing we want to take a look at is compassion. Right? Having compassion for others is not thinking about ourselves in that moment, right? Kind of throwing away thinking about, the possibilities of what could happen if I have compassion for another person. Right? Compassion is forgetting itself and the standards and protocols to answer the cries of another. I find that to be so extremely beautiful, to be able to hold yourself with so much love and compassion, and then put that aside and show up for another person that way. It's incredible. And subtle ways that we can do this is, like I was saying before, this woman was so devastated that she hadn't looked her husband in the eyes for a week, So I noticed that, when I'm talking to one of my loved ones, I want to stop what I'm doing and give them my full attention, right? Look them in the eyes and say, I am present for you. And, that's how I show up. Right? And if anyone asks me to do something, if I have the capability to do it, I am going to do that for that person, with no expectations attached to it, right? If someone asks me to help them move, I will show up, help them move, but knowing that I'm gonna move next week, I'm not gonna show up and help that person move, so that I know that when I need to move, I can ask them and they can't say no, right? That's not an act of compassion. That is forgetting that you're even moving and just showing up and helping that friend, right, who needs you, right? And sometimes just listening, I find that listening is one of the greatest gifts that you can give someone, because so many people want to be heard and so many people don't listen. Have you ever had those moments where someone's talking to you and you're actually not listening to what they're saying, you're just thinking about the next thing to say? That is an act of violence. You're not listening, right? So being able to stop what you're doing and actively be present for someone, listen, and just be there, that is an act of compassion, right? When someone's going through a hard time, right? Or say, you are supposed to meet your friend for lunch, and that friend is like 45 minutes late. You're like texting them, calling them, where are they? And you're getting mad, like you're getting real frustrated. You're about to walk out the door, and then they show up, and you're ready to just like yell at them for being late. Like, what were you doing? What took you so long? We were supposed to be here. I've been sitting here for 45 minutes. Before you do that, what happened? Why were you late? Are you okay? They could have been in a car accident. They could have, had an incident at home that they had to address. So taking some breath before we initiate the reaction that we are about to have, that is the practice of ahimsa, right? So if we have any questions around this yama, please reach out. And again, I cannot speak any higher about this book. I use it a lot in my yoga classes that I teach. And there's just so many great words in this book, great wisdom. It is phenomenal. So I highly recommend getting it. So that is it around ahimsa, our first yama. So our next video will be the second yama. So I can't wait to film that video for you guys. So if you have any questions around ahimsa, please reach out to us. We can be contacted at lavendercoolyoga.com. And again, my name is Gwen, and it was so wonderful being able to talk about our first yama, because like I said, it has helped me so much in my life, relieve a lot of unnecessary fights, arguments, and really being able to hold others with an understanding that we are all different. We all have different issues. We all have different ways that fear shows up in our life. We all have different ways that imbalances show up in our life. So we can't assume that everything of our great understanding is going to make sense coming from our one perception, right? Everyone has had a different upbringing. There might be some similarities, but we all process things differently. So being able to, have that strength, have that courage, have that power, to be able to show up for ourselves and for others, I really think that the world will be a greater place. So thank you so much for listening to our video. Again, I cannot wait to film the next one because, like I said, I am so passionate about the yamas and the niyamas. They are incredible tools to relieve suffering within our life, and one of the greatest ways to get to know yourself, right? Because again, you gotta love yourself. You gotta love your flaws, your quirks, everything about you, because you are one, right? You are it, right? You exist for a reason. And finding out why you exist is an incredible gift to give yourself in this life. So have a wonderful rest of your day. We will see you soon. Thank you so much. Namaste.